The reality is, it was a fantasy created by the FBI, and let me remind you, America is the same country which said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
We know that the United States wants Shakila freely, so we can negotiate. We also have someone in prison in the U.S. It's a frail woman called Orya Siddiqui. So yes, we could negotiate some sort of a swap.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। मोअज़्ज़ज़ ख़वातीन हज़रात, आज हमारे दरमियान एक बहुत अहम मेहमान हैं। ये मेहमान अमेरिका से आए हैं। अमेरिका जहाँ इस वक्त आफिया सिद्दीकी अपनी कैद के दिन काट रही है। और कमाल की बात यह है कि ये मेहमान वो वकील हैं जिन्हें पाकिस्तान हुकूमत ने आफिया सिद्दीकी का केस लड़ने के लिए हायर किया था। चार्ल्स स्विफ्ट। चार्ल्स स्विफ्ट की जो बैकग्राउंड है, ये अमेरिकन नेवी से वाबस्ता रहे हैं और उसके बाद इन्होंने सियाटल में जाके अपनी लॉ की तालीम हासिल की और इनका बुनियादी तजर्बा जो था वो इसी तरह के वॉर क्राइम्स और शूटिंग के केसेस को लड़ना था। इनके क्रेडिट पे दो बहुत अहम केस हैं जहां इन्होंने लोगों को रिहाई दिलवाई। पहला केस ओसामा बिन लादेन के ड्राइवर सालम हमदान का केस है कि जो इन्होंने इस बुनियाद पर एक आर्गूमेंट करते हुए रिहाई दिलाई कि अगर न्यूरमबर्ग ट्रायल के जनरल्स जो हैं उनके ड्राइवर्स जो हैं उनको सज़ा नहीं दी जा सकती तो ओसामा बिन लादेन के ड्राइवर को क्यों दी जा सकती है। और दूसरा नूर सलमान जो ऑरलैंडो का मशहूर केस था जिसमें एक आदमी ने 49 लोगों को कत्ल कर दिया था, उसकी बीवी नूर सलमान जो पाकिस्तानी थी और उसको इस बुनियाद पे कि इसका तो कोई कसूर नहीं कि उसके घर में इसकी शादी हुई है और ये उन्होंने उनको रिहाई दिलवाई। बहुत अहम सवालात हैं जो हमने इनसे पूछने हैं कि ये केस वो क्यों हारे और आफिया सिद्दीकी का और मज़ीद क्या मुस्तकबिल हो सकता है, क्या वो रिहाई के किसी रास्ते पर जा सकती हैं। अगरचे कि उस बात को हम ज़्यादातर इनके साथ शेयर नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि इनके पास बहुत से ऐसे प्लान मौजूद हैं जिसके लिए वो आफिया सिद्दीकी किसी न किसी तौर पर कानूनी तरीके से बाहर आ सकती हैं। लेकिन पहले तो ये पहली दफ़ा पाकिस्तान के किसी टेलीविज़न बल्कि दुनिया के किसी टेलीविज़न के सामने आ रहे हैं और पहली दफ़ा ऐसा हो रहा है कि हम इस केस के बराह रास्त वकील से गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं। Thank you very much for coming, Mr. May I call you Charlie or
please, everyone in the Navy.
It's nice, it's nice.
Everyone else has.
So why you have been selected by the Pakistani government to defend Afia Siddiqui?
Well, what they told me in the BARD audit when I was interviewed was that I had the kind of experience that they were looking for. I had been in the military, and this involved soldiers. I had done war crimes trials, the Hamdan trial, and others related to U.S. soldiers. So I had similar experiences with this, and I had a lot of experience defending violent crimes. I'd done a lot of shooting type cases with the scientific evidence that was involved in that sort of thing. So I had the type of experience that they were looking for. I wasn't the only attorney that they selected. They'd also selected two others who were also hired who had differing backgrounds. One had a great relationship with the family. Another, Linda Moreno, had done probably as many terrorism trials in the United States as anyone had. So I came into this as part of the team.
Nice selection. So what type of evidence has been produced by the prosecution against Afia?
The principal prosecution evidence was the testimony of the soldiers themselves. There were 10 soldiers who testified at trial, plus 2 FBI agents, plus a translator, that all testified for the government. All of them told the same story in very different ways. Some of the soldiers said she shot multiple times, 15, 20. I think most people could put that aside as unreliable. But the universal story that they told was that she shot twice at them and the bullets went over their heads. That was their evidence. They offered no forensic evidence to back it up. And that's where the case got going from my standpoint. Because I started with a theory. The theory was it's impossible to shoot 2 bullets inside a room and leave no evidence of it. I noted that the Afghans, when they investigated, hadn't found any evidence of the rifle being fired as claimed by Dr. Siddiqui. I found that there was no evidence of gunpowder residue on her clothing or the blinds. Gunpowder residue is fired anytime a weapon's fired, and it should have been there, but it wasn't, which would suggest that the rifle was not fired. There was a pistol fired in the room. We knew that. There was ample evidence of that. A, Dr. Siddiqui's wounds. B, the wall behind her had a huge hole where the bullet had hit. C, we recovered the bullet. D, we recovered the shell casing. And there was powder residue on the soldier's hands and on his clothing. And there wouldn't have expected to be much on Dr. Siddiqui's clothing, but there was some around the room area.
This shows that
there was still none part.
This shows that the case was not strong against her.
There was significant evidence contradicting it.
Yes.
But most important was that testimony that the soldiers said that they had, that she'd fired 2 rounds over their head. There in the room, in the Pakistan room that was on, or in Afghanistan, in that room, there was 2 holes that they'd photographed up in the wall. It was an adobe wall. And the people who took pictures and claimed that those were bullet holes didn't know much about walls. Because that's not what a bullet does when it hits a wall here in Pakistan or in Afghanistan that's made of mud. A bullet doesn't burrow into it like it does into a Western wall and leave a hole. No, these walls push back. And so what you see is a chunk of the wall out, but no bullet hole, nothing that looks like a bullet. So I knew that that was wrong from my own experience, and that's not what it looks like. Nevertheless, ultimately on the film of Dr. Siddiqui, it shows the camera gets jostled at one moment. It goes up, and there are the holes long before the soldiers ever entered the room. So those holes were there beforehand, and the reason the soldiers testified to them, I've theorized, was that they saw them and thought people will believe she shot.
Did you cross-examine all the testimonies?
Yes, I did. I did not all of them, but most of them. Linda did a couple, Dawn did a couple, but I did the vast majority.
Any contradiction in the statements?
Oh, yes. There was tremendous contradiction on how many shots and that sort of thing. But in the end, they all came down to this story that she shot over their heads into a wall. Some could explain the differences, etc. in it. But in the end, they basically all gotten together and told the same story. And there had been reason for it. Their original report that they wrote afterwards didn't mention her shooting at all. But as attention was drawn to the fact that it was Dr. Siddiqui, my belief and theory at trial was that they became worried that they would be prosecuted. They had just prosecuted a soldier for shooting a prisoner. And they were worried, you know, particularly with a female high profile, how do you end up, you have a 5-foot woman who weighs maybe 105 pounds, maybe, and you end up having to shoot her to take her into custody? There's 10 of you. How did you have to do? There's going to be a lot of questions asked.
Yes.
Let's just put it that way. And this was, well, she got a gun, you know, is a fairly common among police and soldiers. How did you end up shooting that person? They went for my gun. When they don't have a gun, they went for mine. That's a common story that's told. And the reason it's common is it's somewhat believable and it justifies the shooting.
Common among the soldiers?
Common among soldiers and police in the United States. When a prisoner's killed and he doesn't have a gun, well, what did he do? He either A, tried to escape, or B, he tried to get my weapon. Okay, that's the pretty common story.
So the incident happened in Afghanistan. Why the trial in the United States and even the jury?
Yes. Okay, that's a quirk under international law. At the time, Afghanistan was quasi-sovereign. The United States was largely exercising.
Do you think that it was a occupied territory of the United States of America?
It was not.
It was not.
But under international law, because we were an invited force, and during this occupied, it wasn't a recognized war.
Invited by whom?
By the Afghan government.
Oh.
We had moved in, yes, and yes, you know, there's a lot of things that we could argue politically. From my aspect as a lawyer, I didn't have a great international law argument. In fact, in Guantanamo and other places, they had argued that you should either be tried by a court-martial if you're a soldier, or by a civilian court if you're a civilian, for any alleged acts. So Dr. Siddiqui found herself, she's not a soldier.
She's not soldier.
So she ended up in civil trial. Now, one of the unfortunate things is the United States got to pick which court she'd end up in. And the way they picked is where they flew her.
It was a federal court?
Yeah, it would always be federal court.
It was
cannot be a state court.
Okay, yes.
But they picked the federal court. If they'd flown her into San Francisco, she'd gotten a trial in San Francisco. If they'd flown her to Los Angeles, the trial would have been in Los Angeles. And
So
you
it's
see,
the choice of the choice of the pilot or choice of the aeroplane driver, like you want to say.
Not so much the choice of the pilot, because they're told where to fly. In this case, the United States picks the Southern District of New York.
So, okay. So you started advocating Afia Siddiqui.
Yes.
So what you perceive the case is?
I believe that it was, I just finished the Noor Salman trial, and that was a case where they accused her of aiding and abetting the shooting. And in that case, she had confessed after 14 hours of police interrogation. I proved her confession was false, and I proved it using the same sort of methodology that I had here. Scientific evidence that showed what she said wasn't truthful.
Wow, what was
evidence?
If she confessed and you proved it, the confession is wrong,
right.
Whether it is due to some coercion or it was her state of mind.
Yeah, I was able to do both on the part. Was that for 14 hours that what you said wasn't the truth, and therefore I got an acquittal. In Dr. Siddiqui's case, I hoped that I would be able to do the same. Well, it was many years before, but that's my methodology. Science first. Mm-hmm. Science doesn't lie on the stand.
Sure.
Human beings do.
Yes.
Science doesn't.
Yes.
Okay? That's why I trust science. And
yes.
So I said, okay, the science has proven that she didn't shoot, and we have reasonable doubt that she ever tried to kill anyone. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, in Dr. Siddiqui's case, there were other factors that prevented that defense from prevailing.
What were the factors?
Well, when I first looked at, remember that videotape I talked about?
I have to take a break for a moment and then we'll come back to the factors, okay? नाज़रीन, हम गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं इस वक्त चार्ली से, जो कि आफिया सिद्दीकी के वकील थे, और मिलते हैं एक वक्फे के बाद.